Yeah, both Nick and I have a background in language and literature, which makes us a little sensitive to words like, you heard the Google people talking about dog fooding their products. I don't know if any of you have ever eaten at the Google cafeteria, but they have a sushi chef. So I just want you to know that dog fooding can mean different things to different people. And also sensitive to this word cloud. So, what struck me about today is for a conference about cloud, we've been awfully down to earth. I mean, we've seen demos, we've talked about very practical things. The problem with clouds, by the way, if they get too close to the earth, is they become fog. And so part of this exercise, I actually want to invoke one more Google app, which is Google Earth. So I'm going to try to pull us back up from ground level. And I want to give you a perspective on the cloud phenomenon and why now and why here. Because the question you're asking by attending this is not if. Because if you didn't think the answer to if was yes, you would have sent somebody else to come in your place. The question you're answering is when. And that's always the question. And with technology adoption, it's always the question. The visionaries always are interested in going early for competitive advantage. And the conservatives are always interested in never going. They tend to move when the land underneath them moves, right? And pragmatists are always trying to figure out when to go at the right time. And the people they trust the most are other pragmatists, which is why the networking breaks are so important in a conference like this. Because you say, well, I don't know, are you doing it? I don't know if you know. Me neither. No, I'm not doing it. Okay, me neither, okay. Or you are? You are? Oh my God, I guess I better too, right? And that's a function that we're going through here. Well, I want to kind of put this in the context of excuse me, I'm going to work through this a little like this. Two sets of trends. One is, what is the business environment that is creating this inexorable forcing function toward more collaborative exercises and IT in service to collaborative relationships? Because that's not where IT started, and it's not where business started, okay? And the second piece of this thing has to do with the corresponding trends in IT innovation. And again, I'll just bring these up. This notion that cloud computing is actually going to restructure the stack. And that, by the way, is a very, very big thing because there's about $2 trillion worth of economic value created by this stack every year. There's a whole lot of people that don't want to move, right? And so it's a very big change. And what's going to come out of both of these things is this notion of context and core. And so just by way of definition, I want to put these three terms in relation to each other. Core, and you've heard speaker after speaker mention this again and again, are processes that differentiate your company for competitive advantage. And it is absolutely critical that you distinguish those processes from all other processes. Because that's where you're going to get your economic value add, from doing those more intensely, more effectively than your competitors. Everything else you do is context. And if you think about it, most of what your company does is context, and the more mature your category, the greater the percentage will be context. Because context means you do it, but so do the other people in your sector. They do the same thing. And so this issue of discriminating the two and getting your IT spend more into core and less and out of context, that's where this whole thing is heading and why cloud computing is so important. And somebody already stole the definition for cloud. Cloud is that puffy little cartoon figure that we used to draw in the middle. Actually, we always put the database in the middle of the diagram, and then we had this cloud thing over to the side. And gradually, the cloud has sort of drifted over the database, and we're going to talk about what the significance of that is going forward. So I want to start with business innovation. And this is really a function of the last 15 years, and I would argue it's a function of the internet becoming an increasingly global nervous system. But the globalization of business, which we've all been exposed to in the last decade and a half, has had the effect of bringing low-cost economies into the global sphere, which means they're introducing offers typically on basis of a price advantage, a cloned offer that's a price advantage. That has the effect of commoditizing the business category you're in. Now, if you are in a high-value economy, high-cost economy, you must differentiate in order to sustain your margins. So the pressure to differentiate becomes much, much higher. And when you can't, you tend to resort to protectionism because you say, oh, I can't keep my standard of living. But the protectionism is only a delaying action. It's never permanent. So differentiation. To differentiate, you specialize. And in specializing, you have to let go of the stuff that you don't specialize in, and that's where the business networking is coming from. Okay? So all of a sudden, a bunch of things that you used to do in-house, contract manufacturing being a very obvious example for those of you who make hard goods, is becoming something that's done outside. So that's the rise of business networks. We've also had this little economic hiccup brought to us by our friends in New York and London and elsewhere, and all that's done is just put more pressure on this phenomenon, but it hasn't changed the phenomenon. It's just made it more acute. And the pain of commoditization in particular has become very acute, okay? So the two things that drives is this enormous pressure to divest yourself of non-core or what we call context work, okay? And in particular, outsourcing mission-critical processes. I'm going to come back to this issue. It's not very hard to outsource a process that is not mission-critical. But when it's mission critical, it is terrifyingly hard. And the questions the most acute questions we've had during the day have been people saying, hang on, I just feel like you're skating over the mission critical problem too easily. I want you to come back to that. So we'll take a look at that. And that's led to focuses on service level agreements, which 15 years ago, frankly, were legal contracts that were painfully out of touch with reality. And we're now trying to figure out how do we get to a more real-time sensitive collaborative system, business network optimization. And then the second piece is, and the fellow from Genentech, Todd, pointed out to this, we're also using the new collaborative structures for core as well, but that's much, much rarer, much less frequent. But getting the customer involved in co-design, partner co-design, specialized innovation, collaborating, et cetera. And that's leading to business network incubation. So just to put this core context thing in perspective, because this model I think will be very helpful in sorting out discussions with your colleagues. Core, I've said, creates competitive advantage. Context does not, okay? Mission critical means if this thing goes south, we're toast. And enabling means I have some room to experiment and whatever. And so the reward equation says I would like to move resources to the right. And the risk equation says, I want to move resources up. And what you're going to discover with this thing is that the third quadrant, the quadrant which is mission-critical context, is the problem quadrant. It's IT's fundamental burden to bear, but it's everybody's burden to bear. It's not just IT's. But in the IT organization, this is when you find yourself having 80% of your resources trapped in something you don't want them to be in. It's because it's mission-critical, right? But it's not differentiating. So what you'd like to have happen with a model like this is you'd like to start life by saying, look, we want to experiment with something. We'd like to do something really different that will differentiate us. We're going to pilot it. We're going to incubate it. We're going to do it someplace where, frankly, if it doesn't work, we're not in real trouble. But if it does work, we do want to take it into the mission-critical zone. And a lot of the discussion today around Google Apps and around the Salesforce platform and these various things have been just saying, wow, didn't know you were incubating as much as you are. Is it time for me to deploy? And all of our CIOs up here were saying, we have, and here's our experience to date. But that's the when issue that drives a conference like this going forward. When you deploy originally, you may very well get competitive advantage, particularly if you're going early in the life of a category. But at some point, whatever you've done, other people will do as well if it's successful. And now the same function has migrated from a competitive advantage creating opportunity to one that is now no longer differentiating, no longer advantageous, but it is still mission critical. Okay? And as it does that, as scale gets larger and larger and larger, it tends to attract resources because people are afraid to be accountable for a failure. Well, they're not afraid, they're actually mandated to prevent failures, so they tend to hoard resources. And what you would like to be able to do is to start offloading those resources so you could create a fund to fund the new innovations. This is what we're trying to make happen. But the challenge that we all face is that resources accumulate in that upper right-hand quadrant. And so we're continually looking at structural ways to extract resources from that quadrant. The whole cloud computing premise is that we have way too much contingency resource trapped in unvirtualized computers, backup data centers, et cetera, unused spindles on our storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the level of the technology. But at the level of the company, we have resources trapped in customer service centers that don't differentiate us, in manufacturing processes that may not differentiate us, possibly in sales processes, even R&D. There's a bunch of R&D we're doing. We're thinking, why are we doing that R&D? That's not what makes us different. It has to be done, but that doesn't mean we have to do it. And all of that issue of trying to figure out what should we do, trying to get more of our total time on the left-hand side of this diagram, is driving business innovation right now. What can we give to partners? What can we keep ourselves? And it's creating two kinds of networks. One for the early stages of developing a capability, and the other for the later stages. So the one on the left is what we call a collaborative network. It emerges whenever anything new is happening. You saw Mark reference some of his partners. Google is putting up signs about their partners. What they're saying is we're at the beginning of a phenomenon. Collaborative networks are critical to scaling the thing and solving a whole new set of problems that have never been solved before. So there's a whole bunch of standards we haven't solved for. There's a whole bunch of protocols we haven't solved for. That's what we're trying to do here. It's a very relationship-oriented time in the development of industry. You know each other. You tend to see each other at similar conferences. It's the outgrowth, actually, of a project team. It's become kind of a virtualized, sort of semi-integrated project team. Think of a collaborative network that way. And it's organized around an orchestrator, a leader who comes to the fore, a Salesforce, a Google, a whomever, who says, look, I'm going to pull the industry together because I think it's in our collective interest, and it's certainly in my company's interest, to go forward. And it's all about expertise, it's all about innovation, it's all about market development. That's early in the life cycle of things. As things shake out and become more and more ordinary, and frankly, as they go from being less core and more context, you see the rise of the other type of network. This is a coordinated network. It's about efficiency, not about effectiveness. It's about high volume transactional applications. I just need to get this stuff done, okay? It's an outgrowth of value chains, not project teams. The less people talk to each other in this model, the better, right? We're just trying to get stuff. We're trying to get through a toll booth. Don't talk about your children and show pictures. Just move your car, okay? That's what we're trying to do, okay? And so what happens is these networks organize around very powerful figures called concentrators, who are pretty generally loathed, right? People hate concentrators because they're sort of neo-fascist by nature. And they tend to grab all the profits for themselves. So whether it's a Walmart or whether it's, it's somebody in the middle of one of these networks who's just driving it for efficiency mercilessly and going forward. So in looking at your situation and in looking at cloud computing and where it's going to fit in your world going forward, you need to think about inherently, is my company a complex systems company? Is that how we make money? Or is my company a volume ops company? Is that how we make money? Because the way you're going to respond to IT is going to be very, very different. If you're a collaborative network-oriented company, you're going to be looking much more at high bandwidth communications technologies, which I'm going to talk about more. If you're a high volume efficiency play, you're looking much more at transaction processing technologies and how do you get them more highly distributed. And the two are very different IT paths. So you should, when you're talking with your colleagues about the adoption of technology, it's really important that you get clear which one of these is your stronger play in your company, and are you talking to someone who's a bird of a feather or someone who's, frankly, of a different species going forward. So when you look at this from the point of view of how to invest in technology to address this issue of core and context, and how to address these network opportunities, 4 fundamental investment zones. One is I'm going to invest in some of these systems to get into new markets. The second one is I'm going to invest in systems to help me outsource my context. The third is I'm going to invest in systems that help me innovate as a network. And the fourth and final one is I'm investing in systems to help me compete as a network. And this is an evolutionary model in the sense that the most basic is at the bottom, going to the most advanced or least mature at the top. So just to give you a flavor of what that means, to give you just some specifics, extending your market access simply means I'm going to play in additional supply chains, I'm going to play in additional geographies, perhaps through partners or indirect channels, I'm going to play with other distribution channels. So it's just fundamental use of systems to just get into those places and expand my footprint as a company. The next set of stuff, and I would argue that most of the firms that I've talked to today have very significantly done that already. Most of us also have been through this second thing about outsourcing our context, although that is more of a range. if you're in the electronics industry, it's very unusual for you to manufacture your own goods anymore. Indirect sales channels for many of us are a way of life. For many of us, they're a new way of life. But this need to be able to get to the market in more and more efficient ways. And business process outsourcing, we've talked about already. So this is kind of where I would argue the last 10 years, this is where I've spent the most time with CIOs, is on this second step. What can I do? What can I not do? Both inside IT, what can I outsource? But more importantly, how does outsourcing change my investment in IT? What am I supposed to do with my IT systems in an outsourcing world? I think we still have a long way to go there in terms of maintaining that service level interface with our outsourcing vendors. Innovating as a network. We've seen this is more advanced, but in the venture community, we see a lot of this. The open source movement in general is inherently a network collaboration around innovation. New drug discovery, as Todd was telling you, inherently a collaborative effort between the universities, the startups, even competing pharmaceutical companies. Financial services, highly innovative. We maybe a little more innovative than we needed. We have to remind them that it's mission critical. It's our money. They forgot. They're helping themselves to it in great large handfuls. And then finally, competing as a network, which is very advanced. But right now, if you are a media company, if you're an advertising company, if you're a telecommunications company of any kind, you are competing as a global network with other companies in real time. And so think about the pressure of IT as you move up this ladder. And one of the questions you want to be asking yourself as you think about IT innovation is, which stair is my company needing me to optimize on these days? Because your company cannot jump on all 4 stairs at once. And that should filter and characterize the questions you ask and the challenges you pose to your IT vendors. So the key takeaways from this: leveraging your business network puts extensive pressure on IT regardless of which stair you pick. Sophisticated IT systems have given global enterprises a competitive advantage over small local businesses, particularly the SAP, Oracle era that is about to change. That whole democratizing influence that we talked about this morning of cloud computing. And so we all have to get prepared. We all have to get prepared to take our IT game up a level, because a lot of the stuff, and managing your own email is like just a painful example of mission critical context. There's no chance that you can get competitive advantage from doing that. But for a long time, because other people had very inferior systems, you could actually have a kind of an exclusive sense of, well, we get better systems than our smaller riffraff competitors do. Not anymore, not anymore. So we have to take our game up a level to differentiate. And that's driving to this second area of current trends in IT innovation. And so the thing to think about this, there are lots of ways of talking about the change. I want to talk about a change from the fundamental focus and funding focus of IT in my entire professional career has been what we call systems of record. So systems of record are all the transaction systems that we originally built on mainframes. We migrated to mini computers. We migrated to client server. We're migrating onto the web. It's every functional transaction system, and they're all based on a database. And fundamentally, there's gazintas and gazautas, and there's a database. Okay? 3 decades of investment, massive investment, well over 50%, miles over 50% of the IT investment has been in service to deploying these systems of record. My claim right now is Y2K accelerated that to a massive place. We got massive global indigestion, and we stopped eating. Okay? So enterprise IT went into the doldrums, and fundamentally, when we came out, we realized, hey, we're kind of done. We're kind of done. I mean, can we tweak them again? Yes. Can we port them to someplace else? Sure. So of the 100% lifetime value we're going to get from systems of record, I would submit that the companies in this room have gotten 85% or more as of today. Is there another 10 to 15% to go get? Sure. But on the other hand, when you look at communication and collaboration systems, which is where I'm going next, I think the lifetime value you've gotten is maybe 10%. So at the margin, I think what you're going to see with cloud computing is not just a move from this notion of forklifting a transactional system from one area to another is the least interesting part of cloud computing I can imagine, because I think it's kind of done. So for me, and for the venture community, by the way, in California, enterprise IT for this entire decade has been on hold. Meanwhile, consumer IT has been on fire. Okay? And you heard a lot about that today in terms of where the innovation has been coming from. And if you look at this, the emergence of IT, three things, and these are, I'm preaching to the converted here for sure. The internet has fundamentally changed things in ways you clearly experience in your own home. People just don't pursue information the way they used to. They don't communicate in the way they used to. Broadband has now deeply changed that, currently largely for pictures and video, but increasingly it's going to be for video conferencing, video chatting, and mobile has changed everything. So this device on my hip, this device and a laptop are the two fundamental things that have changed my professional productivity in 35 years, okay? And the internet and broadband have made both of these devices dramatically more valuable. So all of that, if you look at it, that is cloud computing. There is no computer owns a data center. I mean, no consumer owns a data center. So what's happened, of course, and we've referred to this on stage multiple times, is our workforce is saying, hang on, why am I so productive on Saturday and Sunday and then I get to come to work, right? And all of a sudden it's like, slow down. It's like, what's going on here? Why can't I have it the way I want it at work? And you're getting that pressure. You still can hold it off for a while. Well, security, business procedure. I mean, we all know the words to say and the deep voice to say them in, but we're lying, right? Or we're not lying, we're not sure. And the problem is we're going to get called on it. Our bluff is going to get called more and more and more. And so, and by the way, well, we've just spent $20 gazillion on SAP, and the guy, I don't care, I don't use SAP. Well, it's a global, we use everywhere in our corporation. Not in my office, we don't, no, we don't. No. I'm a salesperson, I don't use it. You're not helping me, you're not helping me. And so the drive to get consumer tools into enterprise ready is what we heard about all morning. And we're going to get more of it, more and more of it. Now, I want to kind of give you why that's happening. Why bother with this? Well, if we go back to that global forcing function of globalization and commoditization, if you say we are going to differentiate to add more value, if we're going to do things differently and more creatively and more innovatively, it puts huge pressure on the middle of your organization. If you compare a developed economy enterprise to a developing economy enterprise, the CEOs are all the same. They all went to Harvard or Cambridge or Stanford or MIT. They go to Davos. They all say hello to each other. They're all very, very good. Okay? You go to the bottom of the pyramid, and it used to be we have the educated workforce and they don't. Actually, in America, it's now switching. China, we have the uneducated workforce, and our friends in China and India have a better educated workforce. The bottom of the pyramid used to be some advantage. Then, of course, the cost advantage was huge on the developing side. We've tried to neutralize that with automation. But basically, at the top and the bottom, there's very little chance you're going to get competitive advantage in a developed economy enterprise over a developing. By contrast, the middle management, we have a huge advantage. The two great industrial economies coming online right now of India and China have no middle management to speak of, period. We have hugely developed middle management capabilities, but we got to use them. We got to use them to create core, and right now we have burdened them with context. Being a middle manager is the definition of a thankless job, right? And you carry massive amounts of mission-critical context around on your back every day, and IT has got to help. Our job is to get it off their back. That's the job, okay? So IT for middle and upper management. It's a white-collar productivity crisis. If we do not get yield from this middle management capability, we are going to lose the worldwide battle, and we can discover what that'll be like in a few years. It's all about quality and cycle time of decisions made under conditions of ambiguity. There is no database. There is no answer. The answer is in Harry and Larry and Sherry and Mary and Gary, and I need to get them all on the phone, or I need to get them all on a chat session, or I need to get them all in some collaborative document interaction. And by the way, it's probably not as document-centric as it sounded today. My one criticism of what's been said to you today, it was too document-centric, because that's where the technology is now. People do not normally collaborate around documents. Okay? Documents are part of the collaboration, but there should not be the focal point. The focal point should be eye contact or ear contact, right? And IT is going in that way, but we're still, I think, halfway there. And I think our Lotus Notes experience, which was a fabulous collaboration 1.0, is actually holding us back in thinking about collaboration 2.0. The challenge, of course, to collaborate in real time. So these are the apps, and often when I give a talk like this, I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes explaining these apps to people. you don't get any. You've had 8 hours and you already knew this when you came. But these are the consumer apps that we're just bringing into the enterprise in order to enable real-time decision-making among people who have to concur. They have to reach a consensus, at least an operating consensus. And so they need technologies that are as much about relationship as they are about fact. And they're much about the bandwidth of nuance. So I do some work with Cisco. They have this Telepresence technology. Telepresence is high definition, low latency, life-size video conferencing. It is just like what we're having right here. Okay? In fact, I am a Telepresence. There was a secret, but I can now tell you I'm here for Telepresence. But the point is, it fundamentally allows companies to make global boards and councils a reality, because you can look across the table and see the whites of their eyes, as it were, when people are making these critical commitments. So these are the technologies. Notice that it's communication and collaboration, not instead of traditional computing, but with traditional computing filtered in and leveled in, but it's not the center point anymore. This requires cloud computing. This is why we're going to push to cloud computing. You can't do this without a cloud computing infrastructure. What are some of the use cases? I think there are 3 that we're currently seeing that would cause your company to go earlier or later. So if you don't see this in your business, the next 3 use cases, that means maybe you can wait a little while. If you do see them, I would encourage you to move faster. The first is something we call team to market, which is it's a time to market problem across a collaborative network of participants. And global R&D and manufacturing are classic examples. But you continually have to coordinate against the exception, the emerging condition. So transactional systems are not useful in this situation. They will be to scale it, but not yet. Virtual expert, we saw a bunch of that with that call center thing. But think about the experts in your company. Think whether you need them to intervene during a sales cycle, or during a customer support situation, or during a design architect situation. You know, you have 1 expert and 6 uses for them on 4 continents. Virtual expert, very powerful technology. And then the third, align to respond. The proverbial S hits the fan, and all of a sudden, you need to be on deck now. You've just discovered that you had an insider trader this weekend when you were reading the Wall Street Journal, right? And you went, oops, okay? So by Monday, you had better have your company aligned around this issue. So that ability to respond to critical, or your competitor has just announced X and completely trumped you. And it's like, oh my God, how do we get aligned around? And again, we're global corporations and we have partners involved as well as ourselves. How do you pull us together? To the degree that you have those 3 forces working in your company today, I think you need to get faster into this technology, not slower into this technology. What kind of infrastructure are we talking about? This is the hardest part for anybody who's been in IT longer than 7 seconds, because it was always data-centric. It was always the data. It was always the database. That's why we drew these soup cans and just plunked them in the front of every architecture diagram we could, right? It's not in the database. It's not that it's irrelevant, it's that it's context, right? It's all network-centric, and network is really a proxy for interactive relationship, real-time connecting kinds of technologies, high bandwidth, et cetera. But we weren't raised to be communications architects. That's not where the industry's expertise comes from. If you hire your chief architectural officer, they probably don't know. Well, hopefully, if they're young enough, they do. But historically, this is not what they've known. They've known the old systems architect, Gazinta, Gazauto, workflow, business process, blah, 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 right? Which is still mission critical, but not core, okay? So here's, just to close, what's going to happen? Well, this is the stack that we've been building all of my adult life. And I've been, frankly, I've been dining out with many of these folks, and I appreciate their support, okay? We have a business layer on top of a compute layer. I mean, Mark kind of showed you this with Force.com, okay? This should look very familiar, and in every one of these layers, there are powerful global corporations who have a very strong incentive to keep this stack in place, because this is how they get paid. We've been teasing a lot about Microsoft. It's just not obvious what you would do if you were the CEO of Microsoft, right? Your entire business model for 30 years has made money from this stack. And now it's being disrupted. And, well, you say, well, stop, don't disrupt, right? Well, unfortunately, there's just a whole lot of stuff coming into our world, and any one of these you could say, well, you know, it's a little early, I'm going to discuss it, we'll have a committee, we'll go to a conference, but I'm not actually going to do anything about this. I'll let my next CIO do anything about this. Well, unfortunately, it's coming, we're not there. Enough of this stuff is ganged up and come together that we're now looking at this going, wow, this is, I'm not sure if every one of these gets all the way across, but when you look at the list, you're thinking some of them. And if some of them, they destabilize the stack. And so when you look at the new stack, this is what we think is, this is kind of the pattern we see emerging. A bunch of the same players. By the way, the database does not go away. The database, in one sense, the reason it's important to understand what's changed. It used to be the still point in a turning world. Now it's becoming a part of the stack, but it is no longer the center of the stack. Here are the things that are coming into your world that you better get good at. Mobile devices as clients. Okay, we talked about that with the email here. But and by the way, you can't standardize this device. This is a consumer device coming into your enterprise. So it will be some combination of Android, BlackBerry, Apple iPhone, Symbian, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to bring that into your architecture. Mobile middleware. If you're going to have mobile devices out there, you better have some way to do it. Now, maybe we can get the cloud to be the entire proxy for this, but I would bet not. I would bet you're going to need to have a mobile app server the way you used to have a web app server and the various app servers. Unified communications infrastructure, you're getting bombarded by Cisco and all of Cisco's brethren and sistren. You're saying you want to put this all under a common network. That's going on. And the whole systems management and virtualization, whether you're doing it in the cloud or you're becoming cloud-like or cloudy or partly cloudy or whatever, you know, fair to partly cloudy, whatever, you've inherited all of that stuff. And finally, you've got service providers. And it's not just cloud service providers, it's the entire service provider model that is becoming, you know, more inherent in the structure. So the notion that I can build a room, lock it, put air conditioning around it, not anymore. So the implications, systems of record have become context. Doesn't mean that they're not mission critical, they are mission critical, but you're not going to get any advantage from implementing the next one. Communication and collaboration have become key enablers of next generation core. This is where a dollar spent against communication and collaboration, I submit to you today, is a dollar that is likely to create differentiation for your company. Enterprise systems architectures are recentering around the network, not the database, which is just plain weird. And what that means is still an emerging art. This is a whole new ballgame, and so my only advice is you probably need to start recruiting now, because most of us are the wrong demographic, and we need to bring another layer of expertise and a kind of a reorientation in. So just to recap this, and I'll turn it back over to Adrian. Current trends in business innovation. The rise of business networks. Think about how networked your business is now compared to what it would have looked like 30 years ago. The new economics of global commerce, which are forcing you guys to put more and more into core because otherwise you can't get paid. You can't, the commoditizing influence of global commerce is putting all context just in a horrible position because it's not creating return on capital. It's just horrible. So offloading mission critical context and collaborating for core are sort of the two big themes. And if you play that out in the IT version of that, you have, you know, this cloud computing is completely renovating the stack. There's a new network dynamic around networked assets, not around contained assets. And network-centric, real-time processing, communication, collaboration are the key things. So with that, I know that was a little bit of a fire hose, but I wanted to keep reasonably close to schedule. Thank you very much. Enjoyed at least addressing that to you. Thanks.